One man. Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, welcome in, everybody, to another edition of the 3 Tech Pod, the college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes, along with Trey Reeves. I'm Mitch Mason, and Trey, playoff hockey is going on right now. Our team, Dallas Stars, moving on, knocking out the Avs for, the third time in the last 5 or 6 years. But being back on the podcast today, we're doing part 2 of the quarterback ranking series that you've kind of made a staple of this show in the off season. And you know what? I'm dedicated today to putting in some just clean old fashioned hockey shifts today. I'm going to turn it over to you. This has been your series, but boy, when you call my number, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you the best 45 to 60 seconds just sprinting up and down the ice that you can ask for.
I love it. It's good to have you back in the hosting chair, my friend. We had you on a couple weeks ago, but a little under the weather, so you were coming in off the bench, doing that sprint shift that you're talking about. Yeah. But man, great to have you back in the hosting chair. Great to continue the series. It's one of my favorite little mini portions of the off season because it is looking into who's setting themselves up for maybe a surprising run, maybe having a positional advantage at the quarterback position that we're not necessarily thinking about when we think about contenders. And I know I've certainly found pet cat teams for upcoming seasons by going through this exercise just to see exactly how much of an advantage those teams are going to have and where their quarterbacks rank when it comes to the conference. And leagues we're talking about today, man, might be a renaissance for the Big Ten and the Big 12 in terms of quarterback play this year. I found it, I don't know about you, but I found it really difficult to go through the ranking 1 to 18 and 1 to 16 to get this. And yes, that is what we did. We're not just, pulling names out of a hat here. Like all three of us ranked 1 through whatever for each conference. And we are giving you guys our aggregate top 5.
The ranking the Big Ten quarterbacks filled me with dread as I stare down the barrel of preview season. Just the annual reminder that it's the Big Ten just has so many teams. And I think you're right. I think especially for the Big 12, the Big 10, I felt like because there are so many new faces and for a lot of programs, a lot of first time starters, but the Big 12, man, it's a murderer's row a little bit.
Lots of returning guys too. A lot of guys that have been sitting starters for a couple of years, and there's no days off when it comes to facing a quarterback in the Big 12. It feels
no, there's really not. And so I'm excited to dive into this. I'm excited to just kind of be witness. I think this is the first time, honestly, that I've maybe been on one of the quarterback ranking shows. And so I'm excited to get into it and hash out some top 5, some honorable mentions as well. I'm ready.
Well, let's jump in. You want to start with the Big 10?
Let's start with the Big 10. I love it. Now, when you sat down, I guess I'll ask you this question and then kick it over to you. When you sat down to break down these top 5, what was kind of a criteria or what was the deciding factor with so many competing names that helped you get to your top 5?
Yeah, it is difficult. I tried to really just take it one name at a time, honestly, and put a guy in and say, okay, do I think he is better than this guy? Yes. Okay, he's above that guy. I really tried to make it as simple as I could and not try to get too in the weeds. It's kind of tough, right? Because we're preseason. We're going through this exercise here in the middle of or early part of May, late April, and you got to project, but also try to lean on some of the stuff that we've seen. And then you add in the transfer portal and a lot of guys that have been coming in from maybe a G5 school or maybe didn't work out at their previous spot, but here they are. They're going to try to be the guy at this new school. So it's kind of, I lean personally, and I think all three of us do. I don't want to speak for either of you guys, but I think all three of us tried to lean more towards actual production on the field. We're going to talk about guys, I'll just spoil it a little bit. Julian Sayin and Bryce Underwood didn't make our top 5 for preseason quarterback rankings. Now, I'll captain caveat, just like I did last week on the show. They very well could be 1 and 2 by the time December rolls around. Would not surprise me in the slightest, because those are two extremely talented guys that that have a ton of talent around them and could very well be 1 and 2 in the Big Ten. But we just haven't seen it on the college field yet. And we want to lean a little bit more towards actual production on the field in the preseason, just stuff that we can actually put our eyes on, because time after time again, guys just don't pan out for whatever reason. Or if they're young, like Bryce Underwood, fantastic player, obviously probably going to be worth every penny that Michigan spent on him in NIL by the time his career's done in Ann Arbor. But are we projecting him day one ready to go? I don't know. He's in a quarterback battle right now, so we can't necessarily say he's a top 5 quarterback in the Big Ten if he's not even guaranteed to be the starter day one. So just way too much wait and see there. It's kind of a combination of projection and what we've seen on the field, leaning much more at this point in the offseason to what we've actually seen on the field in college.
I agree. I think, you hear about the reports coming out of Columbus with Julian Sayin, and he looks fantastic. And that's great. We're excited to see him in the regular season. But I agree. I was happy to see how our rankings came out, because so many, national shows, first takes of the world, are going to put Arch Manning, they're going to put Bryce Underwood inside the top 5 because they know that's what's going to draw clicks. But, our promise to you guys, the viewers and the listeners, has always been that the football comes first. The X's and O's comes first. And if we don't have X's and O's to compare, then, you're not going to be a part of that discussion. But I think it is exciting to look forward to the career of Sayin and Underwood at Michigan, to Arch at Texas as he steps into the limelight and becomes a starter. And, all of that evaluation process starts week 0, right? As soon as we lace up the cleats and do this for real, this ranking is, as you mentioned off the top, I think a projection and something that we use to get excited about teams that maybe you might not have thought about. Like, we're going to talk about a couple of universities in these top 5s and the honorable mentions that you probably couldn't name off the top of your head who the quarterback at that university is, right? I had to remind myself, oh yeah, like I'm actually kind of excited about 2025 for this team. So anyway, all of that to say, I think it's time. Let's dive in.
Well, let's jump right into the Big Ten. Number 5 on our list is Preston Stone at, anybody want to guess what school Preston Stone's at? If you haven't been following the portal, he is at Northwestern this year. He is penciled in to be the starting quarterback at Northwestern, of course, coming up from SMU. If you remember this time last year, he was very, very high on our ACC rankings. Mm-hmm. And this is a guy that has all the tools, I think, to be an NFL quarterback, not just a successful college quarterback. I think he has a lot of stuff that projects to the next level. For whatever reason, and I think a lot of those reasons are the offensive line at SMU last year just didn't work out in the offense. We saw it firsthand against BYU when the Kevin Jennings experience kind of took off in full force. Even in a loss for the Mustangs last year, Kevin Jennings was moving the ball much more effectively. That ultimately led to Jennings getting that starting role. Never looked back. By all accounts, Preston Stone was a fantastic teammate throughout that whole situation, a very, very difficult situation to handle for anybody. But losing his starting role at SMU, just the offense not working, handing it over to Kevin Jennings and just being a great cheerleader from the sidelines and being ready to step in if needed to try to lead that team. Now he comes up to a Northwestern school that always has a lot of interesting pieces, but I don't think we can necessarily say they've had a dynamic quarterback in recent memory. I think that this is going to be a new revelation for that coaching staff and for that program to have somebody that they're genuinely excited about with a lot of projectable tools at the quarterback position. So penciling him here at number 5, I could see him leading Northwestern to a surprising season this year because it's just much, much better than they've had in the past.
Yeah, I think Stone's ceiling is the highest that Northwestern has had in maybe recent memory. No disrespect to the former quarterbacks at Northwestern, but it's felt like the Wildcats have been a destination that rivaled Last Chance U a little bit, right at the Power 5 level. Quarterback doesn't work out at a blue chip program, so they're going to go play at Northwestern because they can probably get starting time. And David Braun obviously has done some really solid things there over the last couple of seasons. Northwestern every once in a while would have a surprising team, and so it was kind of a low risk, high reward possibility for quarterbacks to go and play a decent level of football in the Big Ten and maybe try and have a pro career. I think Preston Stone could absolutely scratch that ceiling and certainly raise the floor that Northwestern has at the quarterback position. His 2023 was fantastic, and that's what got him up our ACC rankings last year. Was you looked at what he did at SMU in his first full year starting, and you thought this guy is a draftable quarterback. This is a guy that could lead SMU to the playoff. We weren't talking about Kevin Jennings leading the team to the playoff. We were saying, no, SMU has ACC potential because of what Preston Stone can do in this offense. And, I am curious to see how he does with the talent around him. He's also going to have a really difficult schedule. You talk about a guy who's going to get to test, that hopeful draft stock at Tulane to start the season versus Oregon in week 3. They'll go to Penn State. They'll go to Nebraska. They'll go to USC, home against Michigan, and on the road against Illinois. I mean, it's a murderer's row that the Wildcats have to face this year. And so maybe the Northwestern record doesn't look great at the end of the year, but I think for Preston Stone, this is a great opportunity to say, hey, don't forget about me. This is what I can do with maybe a more put together offensive line and go out and be the magic that we've seen from him at the quarterback spot.
Absolutely. You mentioned his 2023 campaign, almost 3,200 yards, 28 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Last year, the numbers weren't bad other than the sacks that he took. He still had a passer rating of 156.6. So very, very much a situation that just wasn't working out with that offense. I'll put in the call right now, Mitch. I think an NFL GM is going to fall in love with Preston Stone next April, and we're going to see him taken around the 5th or 6th round at the very least. I think someone's really going to like him. He's probably going to be a senior bowl guy that gets a lot of attention in that way too.
I think for Stone, the last thing I'll say on him is the game is not too fast for him, and that's such an important factor, I think, for a lot of quarterbacks that aren't at the Georgias and the Alabamas. You've got to be able to see these quarterbacks process the field in front of them. And we were there. You mentioned at BYU, against BYU, when the Ponies made that change, and Rhett Lashley literally said in his press conference, like, we've got to go with Kevin. It's just the way that the team is kind of functioning the best, and it's not Preston's fault at all, but it's, the offensive line struggling to block, and Kevin can create better out of that than Preston can. But if you give Stone a pocket and if you give him time to survey a defense, he can and will beat you. And that's what I'm so excited to see for 2025.
You ready to get controversial, Mitch?
Let's do it. Dive in.
Number 4 on our list, newly minted UCLA signal caller, Nico Iamaleava. Now, we have dunked on this kid. Maybe not this kid. We've dunked on his team, I'll say.
On his family.
Several times on his family in the last few weeks on this podcast and on social media. But removing all the sideshow, removing all the distractions, I'll just leave it at that. Just talking about his play on the field. First full season as a starter last year at Tennessee. Definitely had those moments where we look at that guy and say, that's a future Heisman contender. Some of the throws that he was making, albeit against the weaker competition on Tennessee's schedule last year, some of the throws that kid was making were next level ready as a freshman, redshirt freshman, making his first run through a full conference schedule or through a full college schedule. I think that Nico has the tools to be a really successful quarterback. Now, will he have all of the other players around him to make him look as good as some of the skill position players that Tennessee had? Maybe not at UCLA, but he's shown me enough, and he has a high enough ceiling, I think, to say that this is going to be a top 5 quarterback in the Big Ten by the end of the year.
The whole narrative from Iamaleava's camp that, well, it was the offensive scheme at Tennessee. It wasn't actually the money, but we just didn't feel like we fit here. I think that's entirely a misnomer, because when I look back at the Tennessee tape, I don't see a fault in scheme that led to Nico's struggles at times or them getting blown out against Ohio State. I see a young quarterback who's just not experienced and wasn't ready to make some big time throws in big time moments, right? I saw a quarterback that overthrew his wide receivers way too often. That's not on the scheme. Like, if a wide receiver is wide open running the post route and you miss him, that's not on the offensive coordinator, right? So I think we looked at Nico and said, man, all the tools are here. All of the talent is there. He's got a big arm. He's got a football brain that can process the game. Now, will he just be able to take that next step? And I think we would have been saying this had he been at Tennessee, just like we're saying it at UCLA. It's on Nico himself to take that big next step and continue to develop as QB1 now of the UCLA Bruins. I do think one advantage that he has at UCLA is now he's going to be partnering with Tino Sinceri, the offensive coordinator, the quarterback's coach, who comes over from Indiana. He obviously had a hand in developing Tua Tagovailoa, Mac Jones at Alabama when he was there with Nick Saban. So a guy who's got some skins on the wall when it comes to quarterback play and explosive quarterback play. Does that mean that Nico's automatically going to be a success? No, absolutely not. But I do think that's a nice piece to the puzzle for Nico that can continue to foster that development and that growth. But you also pointed out he's going to an objectively less talented team as well. And so will he be able to handle that? What happens when, maybe the offensive line struggles early, late, gets worn down late in the season? You didn't necessarily see that from the Volunteers. Their offensive line had taken some nice strides. So I think it's more for me, what can Nico do to continue to evolve as a quarterback, maybe with a little bit less talent around him. That's what I want to see out of him at UCLA.
The big red flag on Nico is what happened when he stepped up in competition. He had just 5 touchdown passes in his first 7 SEC games last year. He had 4 against Vandy to kind of make that overall 9 number in 8 games look a little bit more respectable. But I mean, you're absolutely right. The lasting image that the college football public has of Nico is 14-31 for no touchdowns against Ohio State in the first round of the playoffs. So yeah, he's got a lot to prove as he comes into this new situation. And the schedule, I think, is going to be a little bit softer. I don't think he's going to play week in and week out the defensive level that he was playing in the SEC. There's just a few more opportunities for lesser defenses in the Big Ten that there are in the SEC. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how he handles a new situation and handles all the distractions that he and his team have brought upon himself in the offseason. Yeah,
that's a great point. Right? I mean, they have a little bit of a traveling circus right now. At what point does he lock in, go back to work? I hope Sinceri is a guy that can help him do that. But yeah, very fascinated to watch his journey at UCLA. And I'll be honest, I think it's going to draw a lot more of my attention to that program than I might have otherwise dedicated. So, fun win there for the Bruins.
Well said on the attention aspect. I think that, yeah, I'm way more interested in UCLA football in 2025 than I was this time a couple months ago. That's for sure. All right, number 3, Mitch. I'm very interested to see where you had this guy in your personal rankings, because you have to project a little bit. And I'm thinking I might have carried him to this number 3. It's Dylan Raiola at Nebraska. Up and down freshman season, started really hot, but 11 interceptions were really what held him back last year. 13-11 touchdown to interception ratio. Had some moments, though, where it looked like he was starting to turn a corner. And, another guy that maybe didn't have all the help in the world from an offensive skill position standpoint last year. And again, learning on the fly as a freshman is never easy at the quarterback position. Guy that was thrown in from day one, didn't even get a redshirt season. I think the dual threat ability, the natural jump that we usually see in Matt Rule teams around this time in the tenure has me really excited, though, to see what he can do with a full college offseason under his belt and a full college offseason as the undisputed starter.
Yeah, so I had Rail, I believe, just outside my top 5, and I'm not out on him. I'm not, a Rail hater. We've talked about his shtick is interesting and probably played up and given way too much media time than it needs to be. But at the heart of it, I think is a situation very similar to Imaliava, where it's a very talented quarterback. He's got all the tools. I think sky is the limit if he can develop the way that a lot of people project him to. For me, I think he's got to slow the game down a little bit. I felt like in the biggest moments, it was almost like he heard his own theme music kind of start to play, and the cape went on, and he said, "I'm gonna Patrick Mahomes this," and then he'd overthrow, the game-winning touchdown by like 10 yards. I'm can't remember if it was the Iowa game. I know he missed a couple of throws against Iowa, but late in the season when Nebraska really had a chance to go to 7-8 wins in the regular season, they finished 6-6, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but Raiola just missed some very what felt like easy throws, and I think his mechanics left him in those biggest moments. He started to get the Mahomes happy feet, where suddenly he's just kind of relying on his arm talent. I think if he can stand in the pocket, step through some of those throws, the arm talent is there. He's got to make some better decisions. 11 interceptions. Again, some of those were in really inopportune times. And I also think you're going to start to see that touchdown number creep up as well, because he left a couple out there last season. But overall, I think there's absolutely a world where you look up and Raiola is a top 5 quarterback in the league. I didn't have him quite there to start the season, but he's got a higher ceiling than most. And so for Nebraska fans, man, I think you're just gung-ho about 2025. I think you've got Matt Rule getting the program that he wants. He's recruiting dogs on offense and defense. It'll be interesting to see how they replace some of the production, especially off the defensive line that they lost from last year. But overall, I think arrows pointing up for Nebraska long term.
I put him at number 2 in my personal rankings, and I'll tell you why. Again, projecting, I love that he got the experience that he did last year. I love that he took some lumps as a freshman. I think this is a talented kid. Mitch, he only had 2 games all year last year where he had under 60% completion percentage. He had the win against Rutgers. He was sub 50, not good. And the loss against UCLA, he was at 51.9. Those are the only 2. You can even up it. He was under 60, where he was under 63% completion percentage. So yeah, he missed some throws in some big spots. I cannot argue against that, but over time and consistently, he was making a lot of big throws for a freshman. A lot of that was scheme. A lot of that was making things a little bit easier for him. But I think as he grows and matures into this offense, he has the opportunity to maybe open that playbook up a little bit more, show off that arm talent. This is also a guy that finished the year. I don't know if you've looked this up. Give me a ballpark of where you think rushing yards Dylan Raiola finished last year.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't have his rushing numbers in front of me. I don't remember him. I don't seem to remember him rushing all that much, but maybe I'm wrong.
He finished with negative 65 rushing yards last year.
Okay, instinct was correct.
So I think that's an aspect of his game. Obviously, that includes sacks. He was running for his life constantly against some of these massive Big Ten defensive lines that he was facing last year. I think that's an aspect of his game that he can take up a notch too. So I'm projecting a lot. I'm high on Dylan Raiola. I was really high on Nebraska last offseason, if you remember.
Yep.
But this is a kid that I think can take the next step and be a really, really, I'll go ahead and say elite Big Ten quarterback. I think that he can be a big advantage for Matt Rule in Nebraska. In the wins last year, 8 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. So the interception stat is absolutely key. He can't just have the what the heck happened games. 3 interceptions against Indiana made that one into a laugher. 2 against USC, made a game that they probably should have won on the road into a Trojan win. So cut down on the interceptions. That typically tends to happen for guys from year 1 to year 2. And I think you're going to be in good shape.
I'll let you cue it up for the clip that I'm sure this turns into. But number 2 is Luke Altmaier at Illinois. We had an interesting interaction on Twitter this week where one of the bigger accounts asked, are you invested in Nebraska or Illinois more so over an undetermined length of time? And I basically said, long term, I think I'm higher on Nebraska, but short term, I love what they're doing at Urbana-Champaign. I mean, Burt Ball is in full effect right now. They've got a swagger going on. They've got some physicality that I really enjoy. And Luke Altmaier took a nice tick up in production last year, cut down on the interceptions, was very, very solid for an Illinois team that won 10 games. I think it's an interesting thought experiment, and it's funny that they're touching tags here with Raiola being 3, Altmaier being 2. I'd kind of love you to weigh in on that as well.
I'm really high on Luke Altmaier as well. I had him, I think, number 1 in my rankings. I'll have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure I had him number 1. And this is a guy that has improved every single year. Of course, started at Ole Miss and then got his chance to be a starter at Illinois. Had his up and downs as a sophomore, his first year at Illinois, but man, he took a big jump. Now, the only cause for pause that I have for Luke Altmaier is he had a fantastic receiving core last year. And not a lot of people talk about it because when you said it, Burt Ball, when you think about that, you think about ground and pound, big uglies, tight ends, using what we'd think Illinois football was over the past few years. But they actually asked Luke Altmaier to throw the ball 347 times last year.
Yeah.
Somebody can go look it up. I don't know the last time that an Illinois quarterback was throwing it around as much as Luke Altmaier was last year. So they asked him to do a lot more. He stepped up to the challenge with that, took care of the football in a way that we hadn't necessarily seen him do throughout the previous of his career, knocked down his interception percentage substantially last year. So I'm excited about him. The only cause for pause for me is, can he replicate it with the weapons, without having the weapons that he lost to the NFL this year?
Yeah, 13 touchdowns, 10 interceptions in 23. And if you remember, I was critical of Illinois going into 2024 because I doubted Altmaier's ability to take that step forward. It just felt like he cost them far too many times. And then, guess what? Red hot out of the gate to start 24, 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions was Altmaier's final line. The completion percentage took a little bit of a hit, down to about 61% from right up against 65%. But overall, Illinois was a much more complete team. And yeah, they were able to throw the ball. I think it's a good point. Can they continue that going forward into 2025? Well, we'll see. And I'm excited to get to their season preview here in the next, couple of months. But Altmaier, with the experience, with his ability to run, and the clear progression that he took as a passer, I had him at number 2 personally. And I think absolutely you could look up at the end of the year and go, that's the best quarterback in the Big Ten.
And he's one of the main reasons that Illinois is getting hyped as a preseason top 20 team by a good chunk of the college football ethos in this offseason. So he's proven himself time and time again. And I'm really excited to see what he can do to try to take Illinois to the next level and make them a potential college football playoff contender.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Illinois is one of those dark horses. I composed a tweet about them a couple of months ago, I think, once the transfer portal started getting up and rolling. But yeah, if you're not paying attention to Illinois football, now is a great time to start doing a little bit of research, because they have the ingredients to be one of the more dangerous teams this year.
Well, let's go to number 1 in the Big Ten. And this is a guy that we've been waiting to take the next step for probably 3 years now, Mitch. And I think you could argue that he did take some huge strides forward last year. And a lot of the guys around him have moved on. And a lot of the stalwarts at the position in the Big Ten have moved on to the NFL. or move to other schools in college football. So number one is going to be Drew Aller. And if I remember last year, I think we had him second or third on this episode. Kind of really excited for him to take the next step as his second full season as a starter. This year, he'll until year 3 as a starter. And you did see a big production jump last year. I think the false narrative on Drew Aller is that he didn't really get better last year. I think that's just unequivocally false. Now, he did throw more interceptions than he did in 2023, but he was also asked to throw the ball a little bit more. And I think you could definitely make the argument that he had lesser skill talent in 23 than in 24 than he did in 23. And he still led that team to the college football playoff semifinals. Their limitations in my mind last year were not Drew Aller related. I think their limitations were more skill talent on the outside. Obviously, they had Tyler Warren to cover up a lot of that throughout the season, but I don't know how much they did to fix that. So that's my concern with Aller going into 25, but I don't think they will be held back by quarterback play. And I think that you can look at Aller as maybe the most consistent option, the guy that you kind of just put in at number one because he is the most proven of the sitting starters in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think unequivocally he's got to be number one. He's been there, he's done that. So he's got the skins on the wall. I think he's the most talented quarterback that we can kind of bank on going into 2025. And you're right, he did a lot of that without just proven skill talent outside of Tyler Warren. I mean, the production that he had with Warren really built Tyler into the superstar that he is now, headed to the NFL. I think the concern for me with Aller is late in games, he had a couple of what on earth are you doing moments, right? And I'm thinking of that playoff game specifically against Notre Dame where a couple of times it was right there in front of him. The work was cut out for him. Go lead your team down the field, score a touchdown, and you win the semifinal and you're playing for a national championship game. And he couldn't do it, right? A couple of really bad throws. It was clear that when he needed to lean on a superstar wide receiver to go make a play, it wasn't there for him. If he got pressure in his face, he didn't necessarily trust what was downfield in order to get them out of that spot. And so I think once Notre Dame kind of took away Tyler Warren late in those key situations, it was like, okay, well, now what? The production against the best competition, not really there, right? Not really there. Didn't put up some, a bunch of flashy numbers. A couple times even struggled to throw for 100 yards when it mattered the most. So I do think there are a couple of question marks that I have about Drew Aller, but overall, I do feel really good about his arm talent. I feel really good about his mechanics. And I think that if Penn State can be a little bit faster on the outside, can get a little bit more separation down the field, I think Aller's got the tools to have Penn State in the playoff conversation once again.
And it might sound lazy to some people to have him just number one kind of by default. But when you look down the list, there's no one else that's done it better in the Big Ten. There's no one else that has led a team to the heights that Drew Aller has done in the Big Ten coming back for 2025. Will Howard, off to the NFL. Dylan Gabriel, off to the NFL. A lot of replacements coming in this year to the Big Ten. So with that, like, any honorable mentions that you have before we move on to the Big 12?
Yeah, I think Damon Williams at Washington is an exciting name that I had. And I can't remember if I put him inside my top five or I think he was just outside. But, Washington was not a good team last year, and everyone was talking about Will Rogers, obviously in the preseason, leaving Mississippi State, going up to play for Jed Fish. And so I think for a lot of people, they just kind of assumed that Will Rogers was the quarterback all year long. And that's not true. Damon Williams came in, had packages early, and then by the end of the year had taken over as QB1. And this is a kid with a big arm. He's athletic. I love what Washington has cooking up there for this year. And I think if you don't know Damon Williams' name, I think you're going to start to see him as kind of one of those trendy Big Ten quarterbacks, kind of a buzzword almost that you hear through preview season. And then once we get to the regular season, I think you're going to start to see a lot more highlights of his after dark.
If we did my guys for like player level, I know we do like our uh, our teams that we are going to bat for in the off season, but if we did players, individual players, I would be fighting you for him because I'm really excited about what he can do in Washington. Got to play in all 13 games last year, and you mentioned it started out as packages, but was taking over as the starter by the end of that year, and I think has a very, very bright future up there in Seattle. With that, let's move on to the Big 12.
Let's do it.
All right. So in the Big 12, we mentioned off the top, man, this was almost impossible to
tough.
rank 1 to 16. There's Rangel at Oklahoma State. Apologies. I think he was our universal number 16.
I think so.
Gosh, the Cowboys might be in for an awful season. But other than maybe like the bottom 3, 1 through 13-ish, I could justify. You could talk me into putting them higher or lower with a specific case, but here's how we came out. Number 5, we'll start off with Josh Hoover at TCU, a guy that I think has flown pretty much under the radar. You know, a lot of people were starting to whisper that maybe Nico Yamaleava might be a target for TCU, but TCU side kind of came out very quickly and said, no, we're good with Josh Hoover. We really like what we have in this kid. A guy that, you know, again, flying under the radar a little bit, but I think could start to turn heads a little bit more as we start the 2025 season.
Yeah, and there were a lot of rumors that Tennessee, once Nico left town, were interested in Josh Hoover. Again, another kid with a big arm. He was throwing the ball all over the yard last year. Got him into trouble at times, but a guy that threw for almost 4,000 yards last season at TCU, 27 touchdowns on the year as well. He kept TCU in a lot of games. He also kind of disappeared at times. I think at the Houston game where like everything fell apart for TCU and Hoover threw a couple of bad interceptions in that one. But overall, I mean, Josh Hoover is like your prototypical fun, explosive offense quarterback, right? I mean, this is a guy that you want on your team. You hate to see him on the other sideline with a drive to beat you because it just feels like he's a winner. And Hoover's been a guy that has really bought in to what they've preached at TCU. I think he's like the prototypical Sonny Dykes quarterback. And I know that, you know, Dykes hasn't had a lot of success since going to the national championship game, but last year was a really nice bounce back season. And I think TCU got lost in the shuffle of some of the other storylines in the expanded playoff. This is a TCU team that absolutely can compete once again in the Big 12. And I think Josh Hoover is going to be a big reason why.
11 interceptions last year, absolutely has to cut down on that. You talk about being a gunslinger, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that he could lead TCU back to some prominence. I think that he has a lot of fun potential there. I had him a little bit lower than number 5, if I'm being honest. I think I had him in the 7 to 8 range. But again, I think 1 through 13 here, you can make some really compelling arguments in the Big 12. Going to number 4, we'll stay in the Lone Star State. Baron Morton at Texas Tech. Gosh, it feels like he's been around forever. Finally stayed healthy last year. This is a guy that, think about all the transfer portal additions that Texas Tech has sought after. All the money they've been reportedly spending in the portal. But they stick with Baron Morton. This is a guy that in his first full season as a healthy starting quarterback last year, threw for over 3,300 yards, 27 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, had a yards per attempt figure over 7.5. He's chucking the ball down the field. And when he's healthy, Texas Tech is a much better team that kind of punches above their weight class. So again, that endorsement of not going after a big name in the portal, not going after, I don't know, like a Connor Wegman or any of the number of other guys that they could have spent some money on in the portal, that's a ringing endorsement of Baron Morton to me. And it shows me that this coaching staff feels like he's the guy to put this really talented roster over the top and have them compete for a conference title.
Yeah, it's time, right? It's time in Lubbock. They've invested heavily in the portal, but Baron Morton is Joey Mack's guy. And I love the belief that they're showing with him. I think if he can continue to build in that consistency, and he only threw 8 interceptions last year, which was And another nice sign to see, right? I mean, you wondered he threw 8 interceptions on far fewer attempts, almost 200 fewer attempts the season before. He only throws 8 last season, 27 touchdowns, right? Almost doubles his touchdown production. I think my big question will be, what does Tech do in the running game? How do they replace Taj Brooks, and how does the offense continue to be balanced? Because listen, the misnomer that Tech is just an air raid offense and all they're doing is slinging the ball all over the yard, that's bygone. They do that a lot, but they also ran the ball quite a bit last year, and that's what the identity of their offense felt like. I'd like to see them continue to have that this season, to protect Morton, to not feel like he's got to go throw the ball 50, 60 times and win in a shootout every single time he takes the field. But yeah, I think, again, very similar to Hoover, a guy with experience, a guy who knows that program. It's time for Texas Tech to finally meet those preseason projections and all the hype. Tech needs to be in the Big 12 title game this season. I think they've got the pieces to be there.
Want to see him tick that completion percentage up a little bit too, because he hovered around the 50s in a lot of big games last year. The Washington State game definitely wasn't his fault. He threw a couple picks, but that one got away from them really early. Yeah. I'm thinking of the Colorado game last year. He missed some throws against a susceptible Colorado secondary at times. So want to see that completion percentage tick up, get above the 65 range for the season, 65 to 68 range. We're in a great sweet spot for Baron Morton and Texas Tech. At number 3, I love this guy so much, man. I'm going to stop tweeting about him from our official account, because every time I tweet a little GIF to celebrate him, I feel like Iowa State kind of collapses. But that's not me taking away from how much I like him. Rocco Beck at Iowa State is our number 3 quarterback, guy that burst on the scene as a freshman, followed that up with a really solid sophomore campaign, and now back again for his 3rd year. It feels like he's been there forever. Feels like these Iowa State quarterbacks usually break out in their freshman year and then just stay forever. And I'm really excited to see if this is his last season in Ames. I don't know what his NFL draft prospects look like, but if this is his last season in Ames, I'm really excited to see if he can put Iowa State over the hump. He got him to the Big 12 title game, of course, last year. Yeah. Can he get them over the hump and into the college football playoff this year?
Well, and had to take over and make a splash, right? In the wake of the Hunter Deckers news.
That's right.
The betting scandal, which, boy, some of the results of that investigation just came out, and it's not good for the players and staff members that were wagering on games. But yeah, I like Rocco Beck a lot. I think he and Matt Campbell have grown together, and their offense was really fun and exciting to watch for most of the year. They tripped up a couple times. That game against Tech at home, that was a weird one to drop in all kinds of weather, when the game couldn't really be on the quarterback's arm necessarily, and then they got blitzed by Arizona State in the Big 12 title game. But I guess I'll kick it back to you. He kind of is your guy. Like, what do you like the most about him, ranking 3rd in a conference full of really fun and talented quarterbacks?
Man, this is going to sound like a cop-out, but he's just a winner. He finds ways to win. I think he elevates the talent around him, because you saw that as a freshman, right? That was a situation where you guys clowned me for saying Iowa State was going to make a bowl game with Hunter Deckers because of the lack of talent that was around them. And then Rocco Beck comes in and takes that same talent that we were really questioned about and finds a way to get him to 7 or 8 wins in a bowl game, and then to the Big 12 title game last year. It's not like he has Breece Hall in the backfield. He has some nice pieces, but he doesn't have some of the guys that that Brock Purdy and some of his predecessors had back there. So he's a winner. He's a guy that makes the talent around him better and lets Iowa State, I've said this about a couple guys, but just lets Iowa State punch above their weight class a little bit. And that's what you need in the Big 12. You need consistency in a league that's just characterized by turmoil year after year and guys just falling off a cliff. Like Noah Fifita, we probably would have ranked him 2nd last year, or 3rd at worst. But in a league that's just characterized by so much turmoil and turnover and topsy-turvy standings year in, year out, Rocco Beck's a guy that you can bet on making your team better.
And the first time we get to see him in 2025 is Farmageddon in Ireland, baby. I mean, what's more exciting than that?
I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah, every time I think about that game, I just chuckle to myself. Like, why are we playing this in Ireland? I don't know. College football's weird, man. But it's great. I'm really excited for it. All right, number 2. We teased this a couple weeks ago on our sleeper episode. Sawyer Robertson at Baylor burst on the scene last year. Another guy that was not supposed to be the starter last year. DeQuan Finn, the big transfer addition from Toledo coming down to Waco, looked like he was going to run away with that starting job, and things got off to a rocky start in Waco. Dave Aranda's kind of on the ropes. We're waiting for the pink slip. Insert Sawyer Robertson. The offense unlocks a new gear, and Baylor, like I said on the sleeper episode, has a Big 12 title scenario on the last week, a very long shot scenario, but they were listed on the page on the Big 12 website. So Sawyer Robertson comes in, the offense almost immediately finds a new gear that they've just been really struggling to find in the first few years of Dave Aranda. And now he's back for another shot at it and really has Baylor poised for even greater heights in 2025.
Yeah, Robertson is just your prototypical West Texas quarterback, right? A guy that can diagnose a defense, make a quick read, get the ball out accurately and on time very, very quickly. Covered him when he was at Lubbock Coronado. He knocked my Grapevine Mustangs out in a playoff game in Sweetwater, Texas, the Mustang Bowl. So, I've watched this kid since he was a high schooler, wanted to go to Texas Tech, wanted to be a Red Raider, didn't get that opportunity, goes to Mississippi State, doesn't work out there, and ends up at a program that, welcomed him arms wide open. And he did give new life, I think, to a Baylor offense that we didn't know how talented they were last year. And I don't honestly know that they were overly talented on the offensive side. We talked about that in the preview. It was like, man, I don't really know where the horses are on this outside of maybe Richard Reese running the football and DeQuan Finn at quarterback, but who's he throwing it to, right? Who's going to have that breakout year? And it really ended up being a different quarterback that had that breakout season. So Baylor's recruited really well. They've done a good job going to the portal for some talented skill players. Kobe Prentice, who, is going to run 1,000,000 miles an hour, comes over from Alabama. So I think the weapons are better stocked this year for Sawyer Robertson. And I think this offense has a chance to be even better this season.
Yeah. I speaking of the game against Texas Tech last year, that's where he really broke out. Coming home to Lubbock, Baylor's backs were against the wall. They already had 3 conference losses at that point. I think 4 losses overall, if I'm remembering the start to their season right. All he does is go 21 of 32 for 5 touchdowns and 274 yards in his homecoming to Lubbock. Just an outstanding performance. That kick-started a win streak down the stretch of last year where he was just phenomenal week in and week out for Baylor. 4 touchdowns against Kansas, 3 touchdowns against Oklahoma State, 3 touchdowns at West Virginia, really tough place to play. So this is a guy that's been around the block. He has a lot of confidence coming into another Big 12 year. And that's why Baylor is a sleeper candidate for me. That's why that they have a shot to take another jump up from 8-4 to a conference title contender this year.
Yeah, I think Baylor is a team that went from, oh my gosh, like how do they pick up the pieces to, you could talk your way to Baylor going to Arlington and, having a chance at making the playoff, which is quite funny.
Speaking of teams that we thought nowhere off the radar a year ago, our number 1 quarterback is Sam Leavitt at Arizona State. This guy came in from relative obscurity at Michigan State. He only played 4 games as a freshman, took his redshirt year, transfers down to play for Kenny Dillingham and Arizona State. And all he does is lead him to a Big 12 title game, and within a whisker of knocking off Texas in the Peach Bowl and going on to the semifinals. That's all he does in his first full season as a college starter. I'm pumped to see Sam Leavitt's encore, man. Like there's very few players that I have been more excited since last season ended to just see step back out onto the field this fall. And Sam Leavitt's right at the top of that list. He kind of burst onto the scene. He was kind of in the shadow of Cam Scadaboo for a while, but really burst on the scene. We kind of started talking a little bit more about him in the middle of conference play last year, where Scadaboo was injured for a little bit, missed a couple games or missed some time. Sam Levitt really took the mantle of that and took the reins of that offense and said, hey, we're not just a running team. We can throw the ball. I'm going to put the team on my back when I need to, get crucial first downs, keep the ball moving to keep us moving down the field. Just cannot say enough good things about the freshman year that he had last year.
I think his playmaking ability and his ability to make something out of absolutely nothing was on display last year. And I mean, what else could you expect from a team that had been so down and out, had so many pieces that were just unknowns, right? Transfers from other programs. They were in our cellar dwellers segment of the Big 12 preview. I mean, nobody expected anything from there. We really didn't have a ton to say from them, except that we liked Sam Levitt coming over from Michigan State. And hey, maybe in a year or two, that's when things all really gel. They said, forget waiting, right? And just took the bull by the horns. I want to see them not fall into that sophomore slump, right? We've seen it so often that quarterbacks have a fantastic first year, a breakout campaign, and then as everybody is waiting to see what's next, they come crashing back to earth, right? Levitt seems to be mature beyond his years. The locker room loves him. His head coach loves him. I want to see them continue to do the little things right. And if so, I think Sam Levitt is one of the better quarterback prospects coming out in the draft in a year or two.
Absolutely. I think a team is going to strike gold. I think he's eligible this year. So we'll see if he elects to stay at Arizona State longer than just this year. But I mean, they've got to be most people's favorite to repeat. I know typically you're not going to get a repeat champion in the Big 12. I'd be really surprised if they were able to run it back just because of how crazy this league is. But going into the season, it's going to be hard to pick somebody other than Arizona State. Now, they will lose Cam Scadaboo. Of course, that's going to be a big part of their offense that they have to replace, and that was a blanket that Levitt could rely on, but getting the year with him to kind of learn on the fly, I think that's going to make him a lot better as he goes into his sophomore season, or this will be a redshirt sophomore season and beyond. So, ton of fun in the Big 12, man. Like, if you don't watch Big 12 football, you are missing out with the level of talent, not just in the quarterback position, but all over the field, and just how crazy the results are week in and week out.
What were some of the notables, the honorable mentions that you had for the Big 12? I mean, we talked about Connor Wegman at Houston. That's really more potential and projection than what we've seen from him over a full season. But what were some other names that you had?
Well, there's two that are really interesting to me, and I didn't really know where to put them because I talk about the production versus what we've seen on the field, and we've seen these guys produce at G5 schools, but we haven't necessarily seen them gonna get a really interesting chance to see them at now in a power conference. Caden Salter coming over from Liberty to Colorado, and Devin Dampier coming from New Mexico to Utah. Those are two guys that I'm really interested to see how they make the jump. I'll be honest, the DeQuan Finn thing really gave me cause for pause. I was really excited to put those guys up to the top, but then as I started comparing other guys, really thinking critically about where they should fall in, I ended up putting them around, I think, 8 or 9 in the league. Both of those guys, I think I put them back to back at either 8 or 9 and 9 and 10, just because I feel like we need to wait and see how they do in a power conference schedule. We were all really excited about DeQuan Finn this time last year coming down to Baylor from Toledo. A lot of times those guys work out, but sometimes they just don't, and I want to see them do it on the field. Dampier from New Mexico to Utah is one of the under-the-radar awesome transfers that I want to track this year because I think that he could revolutionize that Utah offense that needs a spark.
Yeah, I agree. I think Utah is a team that I'm maybe a little bit more down on heading into this year, but Dampier taking over the reins at quarterback, they just need some stability, right? I mean, when you had Cam Rising there and he was healthy, they were an elite program, But since then, the week in, week out, will he play? Won't he play? Who's the backup quarterback this week? It took its toll on a Utah team that just couldn't move the football. And, as their defense started to let them down, that was when you really saw the wheels start to fall off. Dampier's an athletic freak. He had a great season at New Mexico with Bronco Mendenhall. And now I'm really excited to see what he does against, a Big 12 schedule that the defense may be hit or miss that he's facing on a week in, week out basis. The Big 12 has long since shirked that misnomer that, hey, they don't play any defense in this conference. Still, there are some teams that, you're going to be able to get your points against, but the offenses, it's like if you take a series off, if you turn the ball over, you could suddenly find yourself down 7 points in the blink of an eye. And I think that's a more testament to the skill of the offenses throughout the conference than maybe a struggle to play defense. So yeah, it's going to be a baptism by fire, I think, a little bit for Dampier. I'm not as high on Caden Salter just because last year was a little bit of a train wreck. I mean, it felt like they lost focus so many times throughout the year. And Salter, when he got uncomfortable, his game really broke down. I don't know how that translates to Colorado. And, with Dion as the head coach, is that program looks to move on from Shedeur and Travis Hunter and, a host of wide receivers that were drafted to the league this year. There's a lot of pieces that Colorado's got to put in place. So I'll watch from afar on that one. I don't know that I'm going to buy in, but certainly an interesting storyline in the conference.
Other guys we haven't mentioned on this episode, Jake Retzlaff, all he did was lead BYU to almost the college football playoff last year.
Couldn't believe he didn't make the cut. I had him in my top 5. I was shocked to see that he didn't make it.
Yeah, I think he came in number 6 in our consensus rankings, so not too far off. Avery Johnson, I mean, talk about all the talent in the world. If he can just figure out how to be consistent with his arm,
yeah,
things are going to be great in Manhattan. Another guy we'll see week 0. Connor Wegman, you mentioned. Jalen Daniels fell down this list. I know he was really high a couple years ago, but had a big step back year last year. Maybe it was the offense. Maybe it was, it could be a multitude of different things. Health is, of course, a concern with him too. But just all the names, Noah Fifita that I mentioned earlier,
Sure.
that probably would have been top 3 going into last year, all the way down at 10 in our consensus rankings this year. So looking for a bounce back year at Arizona. The depth here is crazy. It's an absolute renaissance, and I really can't wait to see how this shakes out, because that this title race is going to just be insane come October, November.
I agree. I think we're in store for another full conference slate of just standings watching. And I think we may have to have you, bust out the charts once again.
Spreadsheets will be live in September and October.
Absolutely love that. I think that's a great place to stop, though. And I hope, Coach, I hope I put in the quality shifts. Left it all out on the ice there. Had a couple of checks, maybe an assist or two. I think it was a workman's
absolutely
60 minutes. But
your plus minus is fantastic. Your plus minus looks fantastic.
Good. Yeah, getting back on defense, just doing all the little things right. But that'll do it for us here at the 3 Technique. Please let us know, weigh in, what order you would put your personal quarterbacks in for the Big 10, for the Big 12, what we got right, what we got wrong. We'd love to hear from you. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, comment section that never ceases to be busy. So we appreciate you guys, the Jimmies and the Joes. And for Trey Reeves, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until next time, so long, everybody.
Gracious him.